inner companionship has been foundational for just getting through life and making hard decisions. Because if you don't have that with yourself, you're going to be looking for that connection elsewhere.
This made a difference in your life.
Cory Muscara is a former monk,
host of the Practicing Human podcast,
and best-selling author of the book, Stop Missing Your Life.
I was seeing all these other people who would get the job that everyone said, this is what you want to get, and they'd be happy and they think they got it. And a few years later, they'd be miserable, thinking that was going to be it. So it just wasn't adding up. All the ideas about do this and then you'll get that. So it really troubled me into this deeper conversation around what is it I actually want in life? And if it is happiness, what actually is that? Instead of just thinking that, oh, it's going to be different for me, recognize that your mind is not too different than them and you could get caught in the same pitfalls.
As you began discovering like happiness is not some future place you have to arrive to, how did you get to that?
I guess it started with
I just want to quickly thank you for stopping by and starting to watch this Pause to Elevate podcast. If we haven't met before, I am Dr. Al-Mashat, registered psychologist, mindfulness teacher, teacher trainer, and just a human interested in mindset, mindfulness, and principles in psychology that can make a difference in your daily life. My mission is to support you in understanding your mind to transform your life. If you've subscribed, thank you so much. If you haven't done yet, go ahead and click that button. It really helps me to keep this going and reach out to more guests. You can also join our community by signing up to the free newsletter right over here, and it will keep you up to date on online courses about laughter, mindfulness, retreats, online programs, a lot of goodies. Would love to see you there. Meanwhile, enjoy this episode, but it's really intended to be for educational purposes and not a replacement for any advice, care, or direction from a healthcare provider. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I am so happy to share today's conversation with Cory Muscara. He's a former monk and host of Practicing Human podcast and best-selling author of the book, Stop Missing Your Life. His goal is to share wisdom teachings in a practical and accessible ways. And with over 1 million followers across his social media channels, Cory has gained popularity for his down-to-earth teachings on mindfulness, well-being, and mental health. Join us as we explore these topics, including his journey and key insights from completing a 6-month retreat in silence. Cory, my friend, welcome to the Pause to Elevate podcast. Warm welcome to you.
Thanks, Kasim. I feel like this is a long time coming. It's good to be with you.
What a treat to share this with you, truly. And I wonder if we can begin with what led you to have an interest in mindfulness and all this path of healing and change?
Yeah, it's a question I get a lot. Unfortunately, I don't have a cool, deep answer. I didn't get into it for any noble reasons. I was trying to impress my hippie girlfriend in college. She was in a meditation. I wanted her to think I was cool, so I started meditating. And then she broke up with me a couple of weeks later. So there was no happy ending. But the different happy ending of that was that the pain of that breakup was the thing that caused me to take the practice more seriously. So it started as this, you could call it a superficial undertaking. And then even when I was practicing it for superficial reasons, I was noticing different benefits from it. And so then I began to have it as a tool when I needed it. And then I just remember being blown away by not having been taught this previously when I was younger. And we're talking about when I was 21 years old. So I was already very young at this point. But I remember, working with the pain of that breakup, the thoughts, the emotions, even just the rumination around like, what did I do wrong? How can I get her back? For anyone who's been through a breakup, and we're talking about, again, like a 21-year-old breakup, so not like a huge significant thing, but it was a painful part of my life, uh, it's very easy to get caught in a lot of rumination. And so I
Mm.
found that happening. And then I also found that there was an ability to create some space around it. And I would practice just watching the thoughts coming and going, and as like an
Mm.
impartial witness. Mindfulness 101, you could say. But
Mhm.
mindfulness 101 felt like mindfulness PhD at that point, because I had not had access to that. And I thought, this is incredible. More people
Mm.
need to know about this. And I took my type A personality into the practice and started doing it every day. I thought I was going to go into business, into finance. I shifted my well, I didn't shift my major because I was almost done with my economics major, but I got
Mm.
into psychology, started doing training in MBSR and health coaching,
Mm.
and then I really wanted to take it deeper, and that's what led to some of my time in Burma. Really
Mm.
wanting to go to the source of what I perceived as some of the source of these teachings and do a full immersion experience.
Mm. So really what brought you to practice is, a pain point in life.
Hmm.
What kept you going with it is a pain point, but what led you to it is wanting to impress someone, which anyway got you into it.
Yes. Yes.
But truly, it seems like the challenges in life, and when we see the difference it makes, it keeps us going. So I guess that's what you started noticing. This made a difference in your life.
Hmm. Yeah,
Mm.
it was a very different way of relating to my internal
Mm.
world. And it was the first time I was experiencing being able to shift how I felt about myself and in my life, and the a quality of peace and happiness without rearranging the external world. That was a
Mm.
really key insight. There was something
Mm.
I can do with my attention and how it was relating to my experience that would shift how I would feel, shift the level of
Mm.
happiness I would have, the level of peace I would have. And it became, for whatever reason, very clear at that point that that was going to be like, that would be a significant life skill, because I was
Mm.
I was seeing all these other people who peers or people older than me who would graduate, um, get the job that everyone said this is what you want to get, and they'd be happy and they think they got it, and then a few years later they'd be miserable. People who were getting married and living that kind of dream and having kids and thinking that was going to be it, and then they were also miserable. So it just wasn't adding up. All the ideas that were often
Mm.
sold about, do this and then you'll get that, uh,
Mm.
I just saw plenty of examples of that not being the case. So it really
Mm.
troubled me into this deeper conversation around, like, what is it I actually want in life, and if it is happiness, what actually is that? And I should probably figure that out.
So there's something about we're always looking for the next thing, like just got to get into school or finish school or meet the right person. So what was it like for you as you began discovering like happiness is not some future place you have to arrive to? How did you
Mm.
get to that?
Well, I guess it started with perspective shifts, right? There was the first,
Mm.
I think a lot of times we have to see with logic or our own cognition the potential limits of our current beliefs. And so there was just this basic awareness or observation that people were doing things that I thought if I were to do, I would be happy. And I was seeing
Mm.
that there were limitations to that. So that kind of like held my feet to the fire and said, like, look, this is what you think. If you do this, you're going to be happy, but there's other people not. Like, don't turn away from this. Like,
Mm.
instead of just thinking that, oh, it's going to be different for me, like, recognize that your mind is not too different than them, and you could get caught in the same pitfalls. So that then
Mm.
led to then, like, using that awareness into a deeper inquiry of just, okay, well, like, then what would it mean to cultivate a well-being that is not so contingent upon external variables?
Mm.
And so it started with that inquiry, and all I had really at that point was some basic meditation practice, and I was finding that that was doing that to an extent. It was
Mm.
creating a certain peace that wasn't so contingent upon external variables.
Mm.
So I took that as deep as I could, um, and
Mm.
it started out. I like the first phase of that inquiry, of this happiness inquiry, was, can I cultivate a well-being that is not contingent upon external variables? Which
Mm.
is, I think, a noble endeavor, but it's incomplete, and it's a bit juvenile because it doesn't take into consideration just the interdependent nature of being a human being and the reality of external variables on our well-being. But I was
Mm.
just really curious, like, can I strip myself of everything and develop an internal contentment that really didn't need anything? And
Mm.
that's what led me to Southeast Asia, led me to the very intense monastery that you and I both practiced at,
Mm.
Simangon Penditarama.
Mm.
And so I that was designed, like, very intentionally designed to be like my strip down. I wanted to be on the other side of the world. I didn't want to be around family or friends. I didn't want to be around anything that could
Mm.
potentially activate or stimulate familiar comforts and ego identity. And it was profound. It was very
Mm.
difficult, but the final months of that retreat were, I was dwelling in quite deep equanimity, and I could stay
Mm.
in my small room all day long in the dark with, like, mosquitoes and very little food and no music, no writing, no reading, no talking, and was deeply, deeply, deeply content and at peace, and even with rapture at times,
Mm.
like deep joy. And so that was powerful to see
Mm.
what can be done with so little. It was also another wake up call to come back into the world and see that, uh, it wasn't so easy as to just cultivate this thing and now I can take it with me. Now I have that peace forever. Because the idea previous was cultivate this peace, and then everything else will just be, like the cherry on top. But you'll have the core sundae, the
Yeah.
ice cream. Uh, and it's one thing to cultivate this in a monastic setting with different kinds of triggers, is another thing to do it with family and friends and needing to
Mm.
have an identity and, make money and have a business and pay loans and all of that stuff. So
Mm.
that was in the next chapter, of really figuring out, like, what is a certain kind of, peace and internal permission and fulfillment look like
Mm.
integrated in the world. And that's where it got a lot trickier. It was much easier when I was with that impulse of, oh, pursuing things, right? Just getting to that next thing. I want to get to that next thing. Oh, that's not it. How about I just find total peace being exactly where I am? Really nice idea. All the
Mhm.
texts talk about it. But then, what does it look like to make that bridge when you are in the world and you do have to build
Yeah.
things and you do have to take care of things and you do have to pursue? Then, like, what desires do you pay attention to? What's a deeper
Mm.
desire versus what's like a superficial craving? What's the
Mm.
the 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 pulse that can motivate decision and your life and the path
Mm.
versus one that would facilitate more suffering or more conditioning? So those are big questions that, unfortunately, I didn't get the answers to in the monastery. I
Mm.
got a lot of answers there, but basically in a lot of traditional practice, then many traditions do go into the nuances of this, but I didn't get them in my teachings.
Mm.
It was a lot of just treating your whole experience as just arising and passing phenomena. A thought is
Mhm.
just a thought. An emotion is just an emotion. A sensation is you don't read into it. You don't treat it as like one better than the other. At
Mm.
best, you might look at different thoughts as like wholesome or unwholesome, but
Mhm.
even that's tricky for how you really dissect what's a wholesome thought versus an unwholesome thought.
Mhm.
Um, but it turns out, like, when you need to make decisions in life, well, a lot of them are going to happen with
Mm.
thoughts. And when you need to figure out, like, oh, should I be following this impulse or not, what is that impulse? Like, it's going to have an emotional texture to it. And so if you've just, or sensation, and if you've just been trained to view thought, emotion, and sensation all as like one thing, one category of arising phenomena, and hold it
Mm,
independently of judgment or discernment, or only have like limited skills in how you discern them, then it can be quite tricky for how you live
mm,
in the world with all of that moving through and having to make decisions. Again, people listening to this might have had different experiences with their
mhm,
with whatever tradition they were practicing, and I think a lot of teachers do go into these distinctions and this level of discernment. But I found that it was a gap for me, and that was yeah, you could say that the last 12 years have been trying to like figure out what it looks like to integrate the depth of what I got to touch uh, in silence and in renunciation, and bringing it into the world.
mm. So on the one end is this place that we are chasing things and always needing something, and then you ended up going to this retreat, this 6 month retreat in silence in Burma. Of okay, let's put aside all of that and just find deeper experience in you, moment to moment, getting to know you, getting to know your impulses, your autopilots, your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions. And this long pause, talk about a pause, it's a 6 month pause of investigating, and
Yeah.
you did find that place of equanimity within you. And
Mhm.
what you're sharing right here as well is, wait a minute, that's handy and dandy, but then what? Now I gotta live life and be in relation. And I think that's sometimes a misconception of mindfulness, is I gotta just disconnect, retreat somewhere. And you really are bringing what the essence of mindfulness is waking up to our lives.
Mhm.
So as you have been exploring since you came back, what are the different ways that you're kind of are waking up to life, whether it's in relationship or if it's business? Because that's where the rubber meets the road, and you've met that. So I'm wondering.
Yeah. I'm still working it out because I find this to be a very deep, layered inquiry. But the
Mm,
biggest thing that I'm trying to explore, trying to understand, is what is the particular impulse in the system that you might follow while you're doing your life, not so much on the
mm,
meditation cushion or in any contemplative practice, but as you're relating to a conversation with your partner, to work that you might do, to decisions you might make, to whether to
mhm,
stay in the relationship or end the relationship. What's a way that you interface with all of those things that actually conditions
mm,
freedom and alignment versus conditioning more egoic patterns or
mm,
conditioning or things that could lead to suffering?
mm,
and and so there's a bit of I think a cool conversation around like dependent origination in relationship to day-to-day life, where dependent origination is this like very deep teaching about what leads to, we'll get a little Buddhist here, so people, you don't have to subscribe to this, but this idea of like what keeps us on the
mhm,
wheel of samsara, which is like the cycles of birth and death, and just that you can like track all of existence
mm,
back to basically like uh, moments of um, like a certain kind of craving or
mm.
feeling like, oh, if I just have that, or if that were okay, then I would be happy. And that kind of then conditions
Yeah.
pursuing things in life under the guise of that's going to be my refuge. And that one of
Mm,
like freedom, one of the things that conditions freedom is seeing through that delusion. So like when you're sitting in equanimity, like the moments that precede experiences of nirvana, which is like considered cessation, where there's no longer a you who is doing life, there's just like oneness. um, Part of what conditions that is the recognition that just like being tangled up in the drama of life is just going to lead to more drama. If you just get caught up in your thoughts of like, oh, I hate that thought, then you're just now creating more of a frustrating
Mm.
relationship with your thought, and you get an internal war. If you meet whatever arises with an openness and a spaciousness, then you're not reinforcing the sense of there being an I and experience, and therefore like a war between the two. It's just like
Mm.
allowing there. So that's an example of how you meet an experience then conditions the next moment. So you can then take
Mm.
that into your day-to-day decisions and check with yourself,
Mm.
of like, okay, the place within me that's making this decision to
Mm.
like be in this relationship or not, where is it coming from?
Mm.
Is a part of me trying to buoy my yes and talk myself into it, of and saying like, no, this is going to be good for this reason, and then like there's the pros and the
Mm.
cons, but how we can make it work, sort of thing. And you're just kind of like holding it up, you're holding the yes up,
Mm.
and which kind of has like a lot of noise to it, versus like if you were to get quiet and you relax and not try to do anything and just meet what's coming through, what comes through from that space. And often,
Mm.
we might get a different answer. It's like there's like a feeling of it's just a no that's arising, and we don't know why. We don't know if the
Mm.
relationship should end or that it's going to be over forever, but like how things are happening right now, it's like I don't, there's not the energy to move forward. And that is then often met with terror of just like, well, what would that
Mm.
mean if that were to end? And that's where we get caught up in these patterns of conditioning again, where we're leading our life from fear and anxiety because we're terrified of that soft, quiet impulse that's
Mm.
moving through, of to maybe leave the job, or to go in the relationship or leave the relationship, or
Mm.
go to Burma or whatever. But if you look
Mm.
at the resonance of where those messages are arising, they often have the resonance of spaciousness, completeness, and freedom.
Mm.
They're not arguing you into something. They kind of
Mm.
have this like irreducible quality compared to like that noise that's like, no, let's do it, we should make it happen. I often I call it like buoying, because it often
Mm.
feels like that in my system. It's like I'm trying to hold it up with my ideas, but if I were to let that go and just really let myself relax, there would be a bit of an unwinding, and I would touch into it a
Mm.
deeper truth that's maybe scarier. But when I'm
Ah.
there, it has this feeling of like, oh, that's it. I wish it wasn't it. Like my ego wishes it wasn't it, but here it
Ah.
is. And so what I'm trying to do more in my life is make decisions from that place, because that place to me, it has the resonance of like certain freedom and the completeness and the equanimity that I have touched in my practice. And so I'm trying to use
Mm.
that as the backdrop for decisions I make in my life. And um, so far it's working, and it's taking me deeper into more, it's conditioning more moments that have
Mm.
that resonance.
Mm. So, what a beautiful way of describing this buoy. And you speak about in your book as well, befriending ourselves, becoming our own best friend, which does mean getting to know thoughts and emotions we may not want to hear, even whether it's about leaving a job, starting a new job, leaving a partner or a friend, business decisions, like all these things. So, how has your journey been in getting to hear yourself on a deeper level and dropping in, because that can be scary for people, like easier to buoy and pretend to be championing something when that's not the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that in our friendship, the way I experience it now is kind of a precursor to doing a lot of that work of getting life into alignment, because it's terrifying to make decisions, because you just have different needs. There's like the things that you might know you need to do that come from a deeper place within us, and then you have all of
Mm.
the patterns of the younger self that have ideas about who we need to be and what we need to do in order to get safety, praise, love, and connection, and they're often in conflict.
Mm.
And so it can feel like dying sometimes, just like this soft whisper that comes through of like, need to leave the relationship, or need to leave this job, or need to make this change. And then when we actually think about doing it, that's when the younger self comes online and totally freaks out.
Mm.
So that inner friendship is the thing that tethers us to something deeper within ourselves, so we don't feel so isolated in those decisions. And you could view that friendship almost as like the adult self befriending the younger self. But
Mm.
my experience of the development of it first came from that first big retreat in Burma, because it was
Mm.
so intense, and because Sayadaw U Pandita, our
Mhm.
teacher, um, had a different kind of love and compassion that didn't often come through as like a hug and sweet words. It was more just like his his deep standard of you becoming enlightened, and if you are not going to do that, then leave.
Yeah.
So it's a different
No pressure at all.
yeah, no pressure. All right, don't pet the puppies in the monastery if you're going to
Yeah.
take this seriously. It's just,
You, right.
it was intense. So I was young. I was 22 when I went there, and I had a lot of energy. So I pushed myself
Mm.
hard, and I liked his style of teaching at that time
Mm.
for that reason, because I was like, yeah, let's do the work. But
Mm.
it wound me up a lot, and it caused me to push internally,
Mm.
to not like berate myself into practice, but there was a certain intensity in my mind. And I hit points, probably 2.5 months in, where I was like really exhausting myself, to the point where I would often practice, because there was such an emphasis on maintaining moment to moment awareness. Like, don't let a
Mm.
single moment go by without being aware. And anyone who's trying to do that
It's
for like a minute, let alone the 18 hours that you're awake, like, it is near impossible.
yeah, yeah.
Um, like even for like a minute or 5 minutes, every single moment. So I found that my mind would just wander without me. I wasn't intending for it to. It would just go
Mm.
off. So I had to try to create these things to keep my mind fully engaged. So I would imagine when I was meditating that there was a string connecting from my awareness to my breath, which is what I was focusing on. So it was like,
Mm.
my awareness, I just like put in my mind. So I would imagine a string kind of like from my head to my belly. And when my awareness was on my belly, the string was tight. And if it weren't on my belly, the string would collapse. Well,
Mm.
attached to the string, I imagine there was like a pulley system where the string would go up to this pulley. And on the bottom of the pulley, there was a plate with my family sitting on top of the plate. And then underneath the plate was a bowl of lava.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, super intense. And the idea was like, I just wanted to create some stakes for myself. Like, so if I didn't pay attention to the breath, then the string would collapse and my family would fall in the lava. For anyone who's listening, like, trust me, I know how ridiculous this sounds. Anyway, it's like what I was using to really keep that sort of vigor and continuity,
Mm.
and it worked.
High stakes.
Yeah, very high stakes, and it was useful. I developed a certain kind of concentration, but it wasn't sustainable. I created a lot of pain in
Mm.
my body, a lot of intensity, and um, it didn't have this corresponding openness, spaciousness, and freedom. There was a
Mm.
certain kind of peace that came from being so focused, but it was coming at a cost to like the rest of my body.
Mm.
Uh, so anyway, it was like in those moments where I just felt like I was being pushed so hard that something in me softened. And it was the only way that I
Mm.
was able to get through that retreat, where like I had to meet myself with a softness and with an understanding. And that became really the development of this inner friendship, because I felt pretty alone in the experience. I didn't
Mm.
feel like I was getting all of the instruction that I was needing, or from some of my teachers for this particular thing. And
Mm.
so I had to develop that in a relationship with myself,
Mm.
and that it would just start with simple things like um, just talking to myself a little differently. It's just like, it's
Ah.
okay. Like, you're doing a good job. This is really hard. And just
Mm.
that versus, come on, push yourself harder. There can be a role for those
That's a
different
change.
voices.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite a difference. And what I found was that it was actually possible to do what I was trying to do from that place of softness. I could still hold myself to a certain
Mm.
standard and expectation, but do it from a place of compassion. And anyway, that became some of my early experiences of becoming, my own best friend, basically out of survival to get through that experience. Survival is an intense word,
Mm.
but it was, yeah, to get through the intensity. So
Yeah.
yeah, and so that inner friendship I've taken with me ever since that experience. It has felt like an inner coziness with myself, even in very intense experiences and pain and
Mm.
uncertainty and not knowing what to do. I don't have this same
Mm.
shame and beating myself and judgment that I used to have. I don't have it at all.
Ah.
There's a clear seeing when sometimes I might do something off or out of alignment or against my character. I can still look at that and go, that wasn't right. Like, we have to check what's going
Mm.
on here. But it doesn't manifest as, what's wrong with you?
Mm.
You really messed that up. Or some of these deep ideas about being a good or bad person. It kind of
Mm.
it transcended that binary, and just, it was able to hold the complexity of me and could see the earnestness of trying to do life well. So that inner companionship has been foundational for, just a lot
Mm.
of the trickiness of getting through life and making hard decisions. And because if you don't have that with yourself, you're going to be looking for that connection elsewhere.
Mhm.
We're just so wired for that connection. And if you have the orientation, or if you're just, your experience is being really isolated, then you're going to abandon yourself, or something that's coming through as, I think I want this, or there's something better for
Mm.
me, or I know I can have more, do more, or be more. When that gets scary, or the
Mm.
implications of following that get scary, and you feel isolated, then you're going to try to find connection. And if that means, like, staying in a toxic relationship, or staying in a job you don't like because you're scared you might be alone and not getting certain needs met, um, it's
Mm.
just easy to then make decisions to try to get those needs met elsewhere when we feel isolated on ourselves. And it's not to say that you should just live your life only as your friend and not look for support elsewhere. But
Right.
there's a lot of moments in life where you might not have that support around you. And there's temporary periods where it's just you connecting to yourself, knowing that you need to make a decision. And that can feel hard. And if you don't have the connection to yourself and that friendship with yourself, it
Mm.
can be near impossible to go through those moments, because it truly can feel like dying. It has the resonance of
Yeah.
dying, and which is what isolation is. I mean, it's just evolutionarily connected to being uh, kicked out of the tribe, which was
Yeah.
associated with death. That's why we berate ourselves. We, like, try to shame ourselves back into doing something that conforms
Mm.
with the tribe, so that we don't get kicked out of the tribe. So all of these things are just, like, very deeply connected to the feeling of life or death. So I
Yeah.
have so much compassion for anyone who struggles in those moments, or, like, is building a life from a place of maybe some fear, because it feels terrifying to follow something that's coming through that feels right, but you don't know what it looks like yet, and you don't know where it's going to
Yeah.
take you, and if you're going to have support or
Yeah.
friends on the other side. So it's hard.
Hmm. So this connecting to ourself, really, it's challenging work. And when you're sharing your story in Burma, where you are, you went to a part of you that's familiar, which is the push harder,
Hmm.
do more, make it
Hmm.
high stakes, turn up the volume. And that was it seems the gear that was your comfortable gear in a sense of identity. And as you continue to practice, there's a discovery that there's other aspects to you that you can hold at the same time. The part that pushes hard, it doesn't mean it's gone. I don't think it's gone. Mine hasn't gone,
Yeah.
but it's like even recognizing when that push harder is not being helpful right now. And
Yeah.
there's like the space for right now, it's not push harder. Right now, it's
Mhm.
softening. So it's
Yeah.
kind of, it just feels like widening mm, the palette, right? The
Yeah.
flavors. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Mm,
And just seeing when that gear is happening unconsciously, and what
mm,
is it in service to, right? Those patterns, we have so many patterns. Like it's a superpower of mine. It's always been a superpower of mine to have a certain kind of vigor and excitement and enthusiasm for life. My
mm,
parents have seen it since I was like 2 years old. I before I could even speak, or walk, I was pulling out the drawers in the kitchen to create a ladder so I could get the cookies on the counter. So like I've always had, if there's something I want, a lot of energy to do it. I love that part of myself. But if I don't check it, or if I don't inform what it's serving in me, then that
mm,
could easily just it could attach itself to something in my system that actually won't be of service. It could just go
mm,
like, let's just make a ton of money and then
mm.
do a job that is not in alignment, is not serving others, is
Right.
not serving me. So it's like there's this part of me that's ready to serve, and it needs instruction for when to come in.
Mm,
And that's been the interesting inquiry of like, what are the things that when that comes in and takes me deeper, will actually the deepening or the expanding is going to be something that's in service to
mm,
freedom, fulfillment, alignment, or things that I deeply care about in my life, versus just happening habitually. And it's
mm.
messy. It's like impossible for it not to be messy. Like I started kite surfing recently and I love it. And I'm noticing just how much now all I want to do is kite surf. And so like I have to check that, and like where there's this balance of like something that I really like versus then when I want to do it because there's other things I want to avoid doing. And um, so all of this stuff, like you have to have lots of space for there to be wobbling
Mm.
and falling down and reassessing. And it's just like the nature of what it means to be in, alive in the
Yes.
messy duality.
So really, this is the practicing human. Then this
Yeah.
human, a space for all the range of experiences. And I find it's beautiful when people discover that. I know in mindfulness space stress reduction, one place that I see people experiencing that is a container for themselves, how to
Mm.
hold space for themselves. Like, oh, I can be with my sadness, I can be with my anger, rather than this idea I think that many of us have is I'm going to meditate and I'm gonna fix all of those so I don't. That becomes like a bypass. I don't
Hmm.
feel angry, and sometimes people ask me about like, do you ever feel angry? I'm like, never.
Yeah.
Well, of course I do.
What is anger?
What is that?
Yeah.
Like anger, sadness, anger, all of these emotions. There's nothing wrong with them, but w- are they driving us?
Yeah.
I think that's what I find interesting. Are they driving our decision making?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I mean, a lot of what I've been talking about these days is for people is just really giving yourself permission to meet the most alive thing in your experience. And because
Mm,
you take something like forgiveness, a lot of people want to be released of the pain of not being able to
mm,
forgive. And so this is where the spiritual bypassing can come in. You have this idea of the end point that you want to get to, and you try to insert yourself into that experience or insert that experience into yourself. And
mm,
like, what would it mean to forgive? Like, oh, be open and spacious and okay.
mhm.
And it becomes very easy to perform the experience of
Yeah.
forgiveness rather than for it to be a natural arising. And so then the question is like, well, what leads to the natural arising? And um, it seems to be that giving ourselves permission to meet what is most here will then allow
Mm.
the system to unwind some of the patterns that are keeping us from forgiveness. And sometimes the first experience that's here is anger.
Yeah.
And we don't want to feel anger. Maybe we feel like we've been angry, but we haven't really let ourselves fully be angry. We've kind of been angry
Mm.
with a bunch of shame that I shouldn't be angry, or we're ruminating about the anger rather than letting ourselves really just like have that experience. And there's a
Mm.
difference between feeling angry with shame and guilt and like I'm bad for doing this versus like I'm just going to let myself touch the depth
Mm.
of this rage. When you do that and then you like scrape the bottom of the container, just like right to the bottom of that, every experience has its nature to come and go. And so you'll undo that blockage, or you'll begin to move through that emotion, and then it will complete and something else will come up. And you'll
Mm.
often feel then like the anger comes and subsides, but then there's like just a well of grief. And so you just hit
Yeah.
this pocket of grief that might have been associated with feeling betrayal or unsafe. And so
Mm.
that, you could say, becomes like an organizing burden in the system. Right? You have this thing that happened, it created this core pain. Because the pain was too much to be with, it led to layers of anger or numbness. And so now we're up here. We know there's a bunch beneath the surface. We don't want to be here anymore. So we just try to jump to forgiveness over here
Mm.
or down here. But it's usually no, we have to first let ourselves feel the numbness and then feel the anger and then feel the well of grief and then feel the
Mm.
actual core fear that was there, so that our system isn't subconsciously trying to buoy ourselves up from that pain
Mm.
point. And so now from that space of just like actually being with the core wound or the core hurt there, we can hold that from a different place rather than from a
Mm.
compensatory place. And the compensatory place would be the anger, the numbness, the suppression.
Mhm.
And that's then where we get some healing in our system, and
Right.
then forgiveness can arise naturally, not because
Mm.
you're forcing yourself to forgive, but because it's an extension of a recognition of our desire to be free on a deep level, and a seeing um, of our own capacity and or our own complexity and the complexity of others. The timeline for seeing those things is above our pay grade to really know.
Mm.
All we know is what's in front of us. And you just look at it very logically. If anger is in front of me right here, if it's the most salient experience, what are the ways I can interact with it? I could get angry, it's here. What does that do? Well, it just adds more anger. I could get sad, it's here. What does that do? It creates more sadness. I could try to
Mm.
suppress it. What does that do? It creates more separation from myself. I could wallow in it. I just like fully let myself get angry unconsciously
Yeah.
and ruminate and hate. What does that do? It kind of aggravates it even more. I feel like now I'm just like caught in it, or like kind
Mm.
of create a container to just be and hold it and meet it, um, with
Mm.
presence and awareness. Like, well, what does that do? Well, it seems like it allows it to cycle through a little bit. I touch something that seems like it's asking to be touched, and then it shifts. And so
Mm.
you're learning through your trial and error in relationship to experience of what different ways of relating leads to, and that's
Mm.
basically all I've done with my own experience, and then you know aggregate that data over time to kind of inform new ways, more skillful ways of relating to my experience that either take me deeper into alignment with myself
Mm.
or out of alignment, deeper into fulfillment or into suffering.
Mm. There's such trusting in that, trusting the process, and not as a formula. Like, I gotta find anger, then it's gonna lead this, and then I think many people look for, give me the formula so I can get there quickly, like by tomorrow.
Yeah.
And right, and your description is really very beautiful because it's being with letting it unfold, like this precious life can include a range of emotions that we can sit with, be with as our teacher. Like, I get to be with anger today. I get to be with annoyance. What is that? Like with curiosity, which is so different than now shaming it. What's wrong with me? And then fixing it. Like, I'm broken because I'm feeling this.
Hmm.
So that's a different way of being with you're describing.
It can take a long time for us to try something new. We often
Mm,
and we often have to go through a lot of we often have to repeat a negative pattern many times before we're finally ready to let it go, or before we become disillusioned by its utility to actually give us what we think it's supposed to give
mm,
us. And so sometimes we just have to play out maybe for years the pattern of like hating ourselves or not thinking we're good enough or fighting our experience before we really get to see like, oh, I have done that 1,000 times and it
mm.
never gives me what I really want. Might
Yeah.
give me something. Maybe it gives me a little bit of protection. Maybe it gives me a little bit of power, sense of power in myself to be angry. Anger often feels more powerful than sadness. Um,
Mm,
which is why well, especially men tend to
mhm,
hold anger over sadness. Um, so yeah, we can have a lot of space for where our system is at in its learning process, with just like the invitation to just keep paying attention, watch the patterns at
mm.
play, and see like, are they really giving you what they claim to be giving you? And w and if not, then, like, then you can look at, like, "Oh, maybe this isn't working in the way that my mind subconsciously thinks it's going to work." And that becomes, like, a bit of an internal reckoning that can then open us to trying something different.
Mm. So curiosity, really, in exploring, you bring such a sense of curiosity, of looking in, looking a little closer,
Yeah.
looking a little closer. What's happening? What's going on? You know, I have so many more questions for you, and I know we're just getting to the end for today. I feel like we're barely beginning to scratch the surface.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you maybe one more question as well, if it's okay,
Mhm.
which is, the relationship with technology. We've been talking about looking in, allowing space for ourselves, being with what's here. And technology can be beautiful, but can also be a way of not feeling our feelings, not being like, let's just scroll through social media,
Mhm.
way easier. So what would you say to that in terms of your relationship to technology? I know you're active on social media. So how do we balance that, this being in it and not letting it hijack this being human you're describing?
Yeah. I think it's another one that's a very personal inquiry.
Mm,
Everyone's going to have a different relationship to their device and to things like social media. I do it for my teachings, so um, there's a sense of like needing to be on it for my work,
mm,
and at the same time, it so easily blends into addiction because
mm,
it's hard to, I find, to interact with it and not get caught up in the funness and the
mm,
dopamine hits of watching something grow or getting likes or how did this post do, and then scrolling through other things, and it's just like
mm,
the whole thing is designed to be very addictive. I'm not really, I don't have much energy around feeling too victimized by it from the perspective of like it's kind of an old song at this point to just rally against technology and just it's like, yeah, okay, it's here, and let's, if we want to lobby to
mm,
these companies to change it, I think that's good, and there's good people like Tristan Harris
mm,
um, who are doing that. But in general, I think we have to just continue to look at our own relationship to it, and that I find can take again a lot of cycles where
mm,
we let ourselves maybe fully immerse on it without any guardrails and see how that goes, and then try again where we put a lot of guardrails on and go like, I'm only going to go on it 1 hour a day, see how that goes.
mm,
um, And people are going to find like I have a pretty black and white system. It's like it's very all or nothing.
Mm,
So I find I go through these periods where I'm like very tight around it, and I don't let myself go on it a lot.
mm,
And then systems where I'm like full in, and the middle ground of that I find to be tricky. And the
mm,
reason I don't have a clear cut answer for this is that people have different systems, and some people find that middle ground really easy. Like it's just like, no, I've just give myself some permission. Like my wife, Brianna,
mm,
she doesn't get too caught up on in
mm.
Instagram. My system like will go into it and just like more and more and more. Her system, oh,
Yeah.
I like this picture. She sends it to me, and then she's like, good till tomorrow or whatever. So I I'm working with what is that all or nothing tendency is in my system. Why
Mm,
can't I just have this like spacious relationship to it in a way that feels healthy? And that's a combination of me, the technology, how I use the technology, all of that.
yeah.
One thing I don't know if I have it with me. Oh, I do. This I've been playing with. It's called the Brick. Um, and
Mm.
what it does is you scan your phone on it. There's an app it comes with, and as soon as you do, it will block uh, however many apps you want and allow you access to certain apps. Um, so I've been playing with that the last couple
Huh.
of weeks, and it's going great. What I like about it is just it adds a little bit of friction. I'll keep this in the other room, and when I go to check my phone, I have apps that I might need access to, but I had not access to other apps, and so I'll do this before I go to bed because I always found things like that. I
Mm.
wanted my phone next to my bed for my alarm. I tried getting another alarm. It was just I've tried so many things with it. And anyway, like the main point being, I find it good to have my phone next to my bed for different reasons. But I don't find it good to be checking social media when I first wake up. So this
Mm.
allows me to do that before bed, keep it in the other room. My alarm can go off if I'm using an alarm or if need to check something when I first wake up. That's not social media. Great. And then right, this just creates more friction. I have to go in the other room to unlock it. So that's
Mm.
been working well. I like it. So people can try that out. I wrote a whole chapter in my book on working with technology and
Mhm.
smartphone, and so there's a bunch of different tools that might be useful for people in there if you want like practical
Mm.
tools. But I would say for the most part, a lot of us have a sense of what we need to do and use it as an opportunity
Yeah.
to look at your own relationship to and what your beliefs are around it. Even something like Instagram. If you
Yeah.
find like going through Instagram that when you're doing that, you feel yucky or you feel like you're so
Mm.
caught in this comparative mind, then look at who you're following. Right? It's
Mm.
easy to curse the algorithm or the platform. It's like, yeah, but
Mm.
the algorithm wants to serve you like what you want to see more of. So if you're looking at certain things that are
It's gonna
stimulating a certain part of you, you're going to get fed more of that. I would just like unfollow everyone and then slowly build in accounts that maybe just feed you something that
Mm.
nourish that place within you of goodness, of contentment, and watch how we're subconsciously addicted to the drama as well. And
Mm.
so it just becomes a good opportunity for an internal conversation.
Mm. Well, thank you for your nourishing, heartfelt shares and the work you really have been doing, ongoing consistently, being real, being authentic, following your heart, and really sitting with things. I've It's really been a pleasure knowing you. And some people maybe finally made the connection, as you said it earlier on. Is the reason I went to Burma is because of you,
That's
and
right.
it was we met just before you went at a teacher training,
Yeah.
mindfulness based stress reduction, and I was looking. I had looked up a couple of places. I'm like, I want to do a long retreat. And then you're like, wow, I've been looking at a long retreat. I want to go. I'm like, what? Okay, give me a list of long retreats and let's see where they are. And then you went, and then you came back, and then you came back, and you're like, that was really hard. I'm like, perfect.
Yeah.
That's my spot. So thank you for all the work you've done and for the impact you've had on my life as well. I really appreciate you and appreciate all your work. And I'll put your what's the best way for folks to reach you? I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, following on Instagram is a good place if you want to follow along. That's just at Cory Muscara. That would be a good starting place.
Okay, I'll put that, and then they can also look at all the different courses, retreat, online. There's some things they can self-paced, some live things. You have a lot of
Yeah, I'll send you
offerings.
a link for the main course I recommend people start with is my 30-day starting fresh course. The first 10 days are
Mm,
focused on letting go. The next 10 days are focused on reconnecting to a truer
mm,
self. And then the next 10 days of focusing on what it looks like to create or manifest from an aligned place. Um, so
mm.
that's where I tell people to start. So we'll put a link in the show notes that I'll send to you.
We'll include that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again, Corey. Really appreciate you.
Yeah.
And I want to thank all the listeners for taking the time to really be curious and opening their mind, their heart to these ideas. May our moments be filled with ease and may you be present in as many of them. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.